met that dude, Duke the Jeweler, the night before. We was gambling. The next day, dude followed us to the concert. When we left out the concert, we under the garage. Dude went to his car by himself and walked down to the parking lot.
As Jay Prince, over the years, the decades of doing whatever he's doing, he's been having a way of brainwashing people.
Oh, yeah?
To thinking he's doing one thing when he really up to a next.
These industry, these street, homie, they're projecting these rules and then coming here playing like they admirable men with street rules and street that shit. Nah, homie, them little was set up that night.
The street's been lit ever since Boozie finally broke his silence and dropped Jay Prince Jr.'s name out loud, throwing gasoline on one of the dirtiest scandals the rap game has dealt with in years. For the longest time, everybody pointed fingers at Boozie for Duke the Jeweler's tragic death, whispering that he lined Duke up, put him in the wrong spot at the wrong time, and maybe even plotted the whole setup himself. But now the Baton Rouge rapper is flipping the tables. He claims he was nothing but the fall guy, while the real mastermind sat back and let his name sink under accusations. The heat is shifting fast toward Houston's most infamous family, mob ties.
Man, Lord.
And the whole narrative is spinning out of control. That September night in 2022 is where the fire first sparked. Duke the Jeweler, a 29-year-old self-made boss from Chicago, had just finished shining at Boozie's concert in Houston, flexing his craft and his ice like only he could. But only hours later, Duke was gunned down in what police labeled a parking lot robbery. His jewelry gone, his cash gone, even his phone gone. On the surface, it looked like another sad case of someone flashy in the wrong place at the wrong time. But the streets weren't buying that story for a second. Rumors popped off instantly. Boozie invited Duke. Boozie's crew was on the scene.
Any real dude that's ever really been in LA, he checked in. Any real dude that's ever been in Atlanta, he checked in. If you moving and you getting money, you gonna check in because you need to know the right places to be and places not to be. That's a businessman.
And messy claims even spread online that Duke's Louis Vuitton bag turned up inside Boozie's spot. To the public, that was enough. They didn't need proof, they just needed a name. And Boozie's history made him the perfect target. He already had a long trail behind him. Gun cases, messy trials, old charges that painted him as reckless. With a past like that, it was easy to brand him guilty. But cracks in that narrative were always sitting there if you really looked. First off, Duke wasn't killed in Baton Rouge, Boozie's turf. He was taken out in Houston, a city run heavy by Jay Prince Jr. and his mob ties circle. Second, Duke wasn't just some random guy who slipped up.
I mean, everybody be checking in. That's your favorite thing to do, check in with somebody that's gonna rob your stupid ass.
Wow.
Yo, you think that guy, the guy that you don't know in California got your back?
He was at a high-stakes dice game, the kind where egos clash and fortunes change hands quick. And at that same table sat none other than Jay Prince Jr. himself. That detail flipped the conversation completely, because if Duke was moving around surrounded by mob ties, then how could Boozie have been the one pulling strings? Slowly, the whispers started changing. Folks began asking the real question. Why would Boozie, an outsider, try to pull something inside another man's city? As one Houston local said bluntly online, why would Boozie set up a robbery in a place that ain't even his turf?
You heard Junior was the father, and after your mom did her due diligence, what was your thought?
I think that this girl that had the baby, I think she used to work around Junior. So I believe bro bumped into her around Junior, you know what I'm saying?
That'd be bold and straight up disrespectful. Suddenly, the finger pointing started moving toward the princes, and people began side-eyeing mob ties heavy. When Boozie finally spoke out, the whole situation turned upside down. He made it clear. He didn't know Duke personally like that. They met casually at a dice game, Duke showed up to the concert the next day, and then hours later, Duke was gone. That's coincidence, not partnership. But coincidence was all people needed to frame Boozie because his past made him the easy scapegoat.
Man, Lord.
In reality, his baggage made him the perfect fall guy. while J. Prince Jr. stayed quiet in the shadows, shaping the story by saying nothing. And in the rap world, silence can be louder than words. As the story kept unraveling, things got dirtier. Wack 100 came out swinging and didn't sugarcoat a thing. He flat out said the dice game wasn't no friendly gamble. It was rigged. According to him, Duke won when he wasn't supposed to, hit too hard at the table, and that broke the whole system. Because when the house is controlling the game, nobody's supposed to beat it. Wack painted Duke as walking into a trap he didn't even see coming. And when he crossed the wrong line, he paid the ultimate price. He even named names, pointing fingers at J. Prince Jr.'s circle, including dudes like Lil Cam, saying they were behind the so-called robbery. To Wack, this wasn't a random act. It was mob ties showing their teeth, punishing someone who dared to win against the house. That's not safety.
He was walking to his car or something, and some dude tried to rob him. Some dudes tried to rob him. I had just met dude yesterday. We was in a garage. He must have walked outside to the parking lot. We was in a garage. We heard this.
That's predatory power. Charleston White jumped in and doubled down, calling Duke's death completely preventable. He dragged Houston's whole check-in culture for being nothing but extortion dressed up as protection. He said plain and simple, artists and influencers pull up to Houston thinking mob ties got them covered, but they're really walking into shark-infested waters.
If you think about him, he's a clown. Like, I love the hip-hop culture. I'm in love with the hip-hop culture. Blood, sweat, and tears went in my movement for the hip-hop culture.
He drove the point home that Duke checked in, played by the rules, and instead of being protected, he was surrounded, played, and clipped. And that's the part that rattled everybody. The fact that Duke did what people say you're supposed to do, yet it still ended with his death. If checking in means nothing, then what does mob ties protection really stand for? Boosie's name might have carried the weight of rumors, but the facts started leaning another way. With Wack 100 firing shots and Charleston White exposing the flaws in the system, J. Prince Jr.'s silence started looking louder than ever before. Charleston's take cut deep because it exposed just how fragile the whole rap ecosystem really is. Duke wasn't some reckless kid chasing clout. He was a businessman, a professional who believed in a system that turned out to be rotten. But in mob ties world, being naive is dangerous and sometimes fatal. Charleston didn't water it down either. He called it ritualistic, a setup that showed the deeper sickness in the industry, an industry where silence and compliance are rewarded while truth-tellers get buried. And right in the center of all this noise sat Boozie, forced to wear a mask of guilt he swears never belonged to him. By breaking his silence and putting J. Prince Jr.'s name in the mix, Boozie didn't just defend himself, he cracked open the foundation of fear that's been holding Houston's rap politics together for years. Suddenly, the cracks in Mob Tie's empire weren't rumors anymore. They were visible. Boozie wasn't standing alone either. Other voices started chiming in, and when they spoke, the culture paid attention. Wack 100 had already been blasting J. Prince Jr., but then Charleston White stepped in too. And when Charleston speaks, he doesn't hold back. He described Houston as a jungle where mob ties turned the check-in system into a death trap. He said Duke was led into a rigged environment believing he was safe, when in reality, he was walking straight into the lion's den. He laid it out clear. How does somebody check in, follow the rules, and still end up dead? According to him, that ain't protection. That's extortion dressed up with a smile. And Charleston made it bigger than Houston. He widened the scope and called out how the same system plays out everywhere. Out west, Big U has been accused of the same type of game. Rappers like P and B Rock allegedly checked in only to still end up robbed or worse. Even Schoolboy Q admitted, at best, rappers are getting robbed by the same people they checked in with. That ain't safety, that's business built on fear. As the voices stacked up, the picture became clearer. Duke didn't just lose money at a dice game. He lost his life to a power system that protects certain names and sacrifices others. And it wasn't lost on anyone that this same system failed takeoff too. He checked in, he was surrounded by mob ties, and he still got hit in Houston. Boozie jumped right on that point. How could I be the one lining people up when even stars like Takeoff get clipped in Houston? The streets couldn't ignore the pattern anymore. Same names, same city, same so-called protection, and the same deadly result. And just when the situation couldn't get messier, the finesse drama dropped. Word hit that J. Prince Jr. had allegedly gotten Finesse 2x girl pregnant behind his back. For a crew that built its whole image on loyalty and family ties, that looked like betrayal at its core. Finesse, who once shouted mob ties proudly, suddenly went cold. Stopped saying their name, stopped showing any affiliation. In this industry, silence is louder than beef, and that silence spoke volumes. If insiders were walking away, then the house was divided, and a divided house can't stand. Fans online started piecing it together. Takeoff gone, Duke gone, Finesse gone, Boozie speaking out. Every trail seemed to circle back to J. Prince Jr. The pressure grew so heavy that J. Prince Sr., the so-called godfather of Houston hip-hop, had to step into the ring. But instead of addressing the accusations head-on, he came out swinging at Wack 100, calling him a clown and a loudmouth who didn't know what he was talking about. He tried to deflect by clowning the messenger instead of addressing the message. But the problem? The streets weren't buying it anymore. People looked at Senior and asked the obvious. If Takeoff and Duke both died under Mob Tie's watch, what kind of protection is that? And if checking in really works, then why do so many end up robbed or shot after doing it? J. Prince Sr. could call Wack names all day long, but the bodies and the patterns spoke louder than his words. What made Duke's story hit harder was who he was and how he got there. He wasn't some hanger-on chasing attention. Duke built his empire from the ground up, sketching designs in small studios back in Chicago in the early 2000s. Slowly, he flipped his sketches into real gold and diamonds, turning raw craft into a thriving business. His pieces weren't just jewelry, they were stories carved in stone and ice. He didn't have label favors, no industry handouts, just talent, hustle, and vision. That vision put his work on the biggest stages. Rihanna wore his creations. 50 Cent came to him for custom work. Boozie himself got iced out by Duke. He wasn't just another jeweler, he was a visionary. But his independence made him dangerous to the wrong people. In an industry fueled by control, someone like Duke was a problem. He wasn't bending, he wasn't depending, and he didn't fear the politics of checking in. But that night, he walked into a system that didn't protect him. It trapped him. Sources say Duke ran the dice table that night, allegedly stacking over $100,000 in winnings. And if Wack 100 is right, that win sealed his fate. Minutes later, Duke was stripped of everything. His cash, his jewelry, his phone, and hit multiple times. Like someone wanted to erase him completely. That wasn't sloppy robbery. That was an execution. Precise, deliberate, personal. And when footage surfaced of Boozie's reaction afterward, it didn't match the narrative of a cold-blooded setup man. His body language screamed shock, frustration, even grief. He didn't look like a mastermind, he looked blindsided. That raw emotion didn't align with someone pulling strings behind the scenes. It made way more sense that Boozie was caught in the storm, not creating it. By dragging J. Prince Jr. into the spotlight, Boozie flipped the whole script. Suddenly, questions the industry has been too scared to ask for years were out in the open. The Duke the Jeweler case stopped being just a murder mystery. It became a symbol of how twisted and dangerous the game really is when silence, fear, and power decide who survives. Duke wasn't just unlucky, he played by the rules, checked in, showed love, and still didn't make it home. Same thing with Takeoff. Checked in, surrounded, and still gone. That's not coincidence, that's a system. And it's starting to look like that system is collapsing right in front of everybody's eyes. The evidence keeps circling back to the same place, and no amount of dodging or deflection can erase the pattern anymore. The truth is, Mob Tie's power was never about true protection. It was built on fear and reputation. For decades, J. Prince Sr. crafted the untouchable brand, painting himself as the guardian of Houston's hip-hop scene, a man you had to respect if you wanted to step foot in the city. But lately, that image is falling apart piece by piece. The dice games, the extortion claims, the setups, it all paints a picture of a system that isn't protecting rappers, but exploiting them. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Even fans online are calling it out. Some bluntly posting, J. Prince set him up, not Boozie. Those aren't isolated comments. They're a chorus of voices no longer buying the polished story. And the sting cuts deeper because Duke wasn't just another flashy jeweler showing off ice. He was a respected craftsman, a self-made entrepreneur whose hands turned metal and stones into cultural artifacts. His pieces carried stories, legacy, authenticity. That's why names like 50 Cent, Rihanna, King Von, and Boozie wanted his work. Duke wasn't just making jewelry, he was making history. Losing him wasn't another headline, it was a gut punch to the culture, especially for independent hustlers who saw their grind reflected in his. That's why Duke's death hit so different. It felt deliberate, almost ritualistic, like he was targeted because he couldn't be controlled. Boozie breaking his silence and calling out J. Prince Jr. didn't just protect his own name, It shattered the code of silence that kept Houston's politics untouchable. For years, rappers whispered about the dangers of Houston, but nobody wanted to say it out loud. Boozie did. And once he did, the floodgates opened. Wack 100 blasted the dice game as rigged. Charleston White dragged the whole check-in system, calling it extortion with a smile. Even 50 Cent stirred the pot with cryptic reposts that had people raising eyebrows, hinting at truths nobody wanted to touch. And then came the fallout with Finesse 2 times, a move that hit mob ties where it hurt. Word spread that J. Prince Jr. allegedly got Finesse's girl pregnant, a betrayal that cut straight through their family-first image. Finesse, who once praised mob ties loud and proud, went cold. He stopped saying their name, stopped showing affiliation. In this business, silence says more than a diss track, and his silence screamed betrayal. That was the first real crack from the inside. Meanwhile, J. Prince Jr. stayed silent, and fans started taking that silence as guilt. J. Prince Sr. tried to clap back at Wack 100, calling him a clown, but all that did was make the family look defensive. Because if you're really clean, you don't need to insult critics. You show proof, you clear your name, you speak directly to the people. Instead, the streets watched the family dodge questions while bodies piled up and whispers got louder. And the facts cut sharper than words. The coroner's report on Takeoff's death said he was hit multiple times in the head and torso. That's not a stray bullet, that's precision, intentional shots. Place that next to Duke's execution-style killing, and the pattern speaks for itself. 2 men, both checked in, both surrounded by mob ties, both gone. That's not coincidence, that's consistency. Now the mask is slipping, and the empire looks shaky. What once scared rappers into silence is being questioned in the open. Fans, insiders, bloggers, and artists are all connecting the same dots. Mob Ties built its brand on fear and control, but it's being exposed as betrayal, extortion, and setups. Duke's death is what finally made people stop whispering and start talking. Boozie might have been the easy scapegoat at first, but by speaking out, he forced the culture to face an ugly truth. The game has been dirty for years, and the so-called untouchables aren't untouchable anymore. The million-dollar question now is where it goes from here. Will more voices step forward and call the system for what it is, or will silence continue to be survival while speaking out equals risk? Either way, the shift has already begun. Social media has blown the doors wide open, and silence no longer works the way it once did. Duke's death proved the cost of keeping quiet is too high. Boozie said it best when he flipped the script. Y'all tried to line me up. Whether the world fully believes him or not, one thing is clear, he's no longer wearing the scapegoat mask. The empire is cracking, the fear is fading, and the streets are wide awake, watching to see who speaks next and who disappears for daring to tell the truth.